everyone. How is everyone doing? I see so many people already watching, so welcome. Um, Hello from Bonn, Germany. I see people joining us from Malawi, Nairobi, Nigeria. Going by so fast. Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Andrea Chavarri, and on behalf of the Global Landscapes Forum, I am thrilled to welcome you to the AI for the Earth Digital Forum. So this is our first event of the year at the Global Landscapes Forum. In case you're already familiar with us, welcome back. Get comfortable and enjoy the next couple of hours as we're going to discuss the potential, the challenges, and huge opportunities that AI can pose for conservation, biodiversity protection, and ecosystem restoration. And if you are new here, welcome and hello. We are the world's largest knowledge-led platform on sustainable landscapes. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about AI today? There's a huge reason. AI has a lot to do, and it has huge potential to boost climate action around the world. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, we're going to chat with conservationists, developers, and experts around the world who are going to show us exactly that, what we can do, what we are doing, and what we need to keep in mind for developing sustainable, equitable AI solutions for everyone. And before we get started, say hi on the chat. We are streaming right now also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So if you want to get in the Zoom webinar, you still can register to the event. Our colleagues will post the link in the chat right now, so you can join us on Zoom and take advantage of the full interaction of this webinar. I want to read the room first, so I want to start us with a poll. I want to see what your views on AI are, because we are joined here by people from 105 countries from so many different sectors, not only AI experts. So I want to ask you, do you believe AI is a game changer for biodiversity and climate action? Wow, the poll is already moving up so fast. So do you think it will drive real solutions? Do you think it's an overhyped tool and won't solve systemic issues? Or you're still undecided and need to hear more before that? Let us know on the chat, on LinkedIn, and take part in the polls on YouTube and Facebook and Zoom webinar. Wonderful. Okay, so I see that the needle is leaning towards yes. So I guess the majority of you think that there are some real solutions that can be delivered through AI. That's wonderful. We're gonna launch this poll back at the end to see if anything changed here, if the undecided have made a decision towards the end. Wonderful. Right, so now I am pleased to introduce the first session of the day. And let's please welcome Stephanie O'Donnell, who is the tech lead for the Global Wildlife Program at the World Bank. Stephanie, the floor is yours. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely delighted to be here and to be a part of this conversation about AI and its potential in wildlife conservation and addressing some of the challenges facing our planet. And I think it's really clear that AI brings opportunities, but it also brings risks, challenges, and ethical dilemmas. And across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, AI is being applied in conservation, but there are also different people trying to use AI are facing different challenges with access to technology, funding, and governance structures. So today we're here to explore, what works and what doesn't, and why, and how do we avoid AI deepening inequalities in conservation? Some really big questions. I'm not sure we're going to get there in 2 hours, but we're going to give it a really good shot. And so before we get into our first panel discussion in this first session, I'd love to take the opportunity to introduce our first keynote speaker. I'd love to welcome Kate Collott, who is the founder and CEO of Amini, an impact-driven AI startup solving Africa's environmental data scarcity to support regenerating natural capital at scale. Kate couldn't be with us today. She's super busy. She's really hard to lock down, but she's a wonderful speaker and doing really, really amazing work. So she was kind enough to record a message and send some of her thoughts to open this session. So I'd love to welcome Kate.
I'm Kate Callow. I'm the founder and CEO of Amini, and we are a data intelligence company based out of Nairobi, Kenya.
Amazing. And we've been hearing talk about the need to build inclusive AI solutions.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you from your position from an African perspective?
It means that actually we need to build AI that is representative of Africa, our culture, our history, and our people. If you look at the AI systems that are being trained today, they're actually being trained on data that's being scrapped from the internet. But actually you have a large population of the on the African continent who is still not connected to the internet. The digital divide is still real. And that means that those data sets are not representative of us. There's no data on us. We're completely invisible to those models. So when it comes to actually building inclusive AI, we need to make sure that the inputs data that is being used to train those models represents us, so the output that we are getting is actually relevant to us. I mean, we're starting from a blank page, so there's so many opportunities, and I think it comes from enabling young developers to actually solve problems for their countries. There's gazillions of problems to solve, but there is already a very vibrant machine learning developer community on the continent, so we just need to enable them. Things such around agriculture, healthcare, transportation, logistics, like there's a lot to build, but we just need access to the right tools for us to be able to build the solutions for ourselves. I think we are talking a lot about sustainability and climate change in the context of the energy consumption and the water consumption of data centers and supercomputers. One of the things I want to caution against is that, the Global North has had a lot of time to actually innovate and build large models, to build data centers, to build supercomputers. Now the entire world is waking up to the fact that every country in the world needs to start understanding what those AI systems mean for themselves. And we're already starting to put labels and restrictions on, like, do not go and build large models, build things that are very efficient, very small, with forgetting that actually we're not building general purpose technology just to build general purpose technology. We need to build technology that is fit for purpose, and developers, given the choice, they will make the choice that's the most sustainable. Scarcity is the mother of innovation. We're talking about things like small language model, frugal AI, like smaller models. Actually, it's been happening in Africa for so long. There was a movement called TinyML that was born out of the US in 2019. A lot of the adoption came from Nigeria and Kenya. Why? Because those developers didn't have access to large platforms. So we need to remember that our developers have already made the right choice, and we need to trust them to make the right choice, the most sustainable, the most efficient, when it comes to actually solving solutions for their countries.
What a fantastic way to start off this discussion. Thank you so much, Kate. I'd love to bring our first two panelists into the conversation now and introduce them as we embark on our panel about the role of open access AI for community-led restoration. Our first two speakers are Camille Rivera, co-founder of Oceanus Conservation, and Gabrielle Fonadosa, project manager at Data 354. Welcome. We are very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Gabrielle, I'd love to start with you. So Data 354 is using AI to monitor biomass and restoration in Côte d'Or. How does AI support forest and mangrove conservation, and what are the main advantages for using AI for biomass and carbon stock assessments?
Okay, so maybe first let me, explain why there is also such, I would say, hype at the moment in Ivory Coast about, mangroves, because mangroves are also very different, kind of forests, and mangrove can store like 3 or 4 times more carbon than like upland traditional, tropical forest. So there is a very like important and renewed, attention for mangroves in Ivory Coast. And mangrove also, can like protect the, coastline from erosion, which is also very, I would say convenient at the moment because in Ivory Coast, like local communities face like many issues with rising sea levels, for example. And we estimate that in the last 50 years, Ivory Coast has lost like 95% of mangrove like cover has been like destroyed, has been like lost. So we've lost 95% of the mangrove cover in Ivory Coast due to like urban expansion and over exploitation of these mangroves. And at the moment, there is also in Ivory Coast, like the rise of new like carbon finance mechanism with the so-called, carbon credits. And so there is a growing demand in Ivory Coast for like accurate and up-to-date data about mangrove. But the thing is that at the moment, mangrove, it's very hard to estimate biomass to conduct field data collection within the mangrove because these are like forests that are extremely dense, that we have a lot of like accessibility issue in the mangrove. So at Data 354, at the moment, we're developing a tool. It's like an AI powered tool that analyze satellite imagery. So satellite data such as Sentinel-1, radar data, optical data, LiDAR data. But I won't go into details. It is like, technical specification. And so we developed this tool to estimate biomass and carbon stocks by analyzing satellite data. And so at the moment, we've conducted like, like a field work in Fresco, in Sassandra, in different regions in Ivory Coast. And it gives us like 3 main advantages. AI is like with this tool, we aim to, map biomass within the mangroves in Ivory Coast. And I would say we could estimate biomass in a mangrove in just, I would say like instantly, that's what we want to do, to develop a tool. So it's very easy to assess biomass within the mangrove. And also with this tool, we will be able to track change over time. And so it will really help us to, for example, if you're working on a restoration, mangrove project, with this tool, it will be much easier to monitor biomass within the mangrove. It will be easier to create like a warning system, for example, to receive an alert in case of like if we detect any early sign of degradation of the mangrove. And our goal is also to, standardize and scale our models that we're building right now. But I do have to admit that, as I said, like we are developing the tool at the moment. So I would say we are not there yet, but I think it has a very important, like a very promising, potential. Um, and maybe what I can add also is that one of the big, issue and difficulties that we face today is really the lack of ground truth data, especially regarding mangroves in Ivory Coast, because conducting a field trip is so hard, and um, and um, yeah. So I would say that the tool we're developing at the moment will really help. We hope it's gonna help to monitor the mangroves within Ivory Coast. But yeah, field data
Okay.
collection is a big issue.
I think that takes us really beautifully into Camille. The challenges of, okay, AI is great, but how do you get to the point where tools are available, like Gabrielle's, off the shelf? Like it takes a lot of people power and like investment in time and resources in collecting data and then analyzing that data to the point that we can build these models. Can you talk a little bit about your work in this space? Like and then tell us about how AI contributes to ocean and forest conservation efforts. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I think just to also build what Gabrielle mentioned, you really need a lot of data points. So we do have a current project also this year where we partnered with a data science company where we need to collect data points. And in fact, we already collected more than 3,000 data points with the local communities. So we train them how to collect data, how to use the cell phones, what data is needed to generate the results. And then you have to go to the mangrove forest, all the root systems and all the, environmental conditions, even like typhoon that happens in the Philippines. It's very, very weather dependent to have these challenges. And in fact, just to answer also like what Gabrielle mentioned, like the data that we collected, so this project built upon the 3,000 data points, but we already collected back then also another 3,000 data points. So in total about 6,000. And this could generate results from calculating carbon biomass, and we had drone data as well. So we flew so many drone in about 80 to 100 hectare mangrove area. Then you can do tree cover and even mangrove extent. So I think that really gives a lot, as you said, Stephanie, you need a lot of manpower, and in order to do this, you need to train a lot of communities. And another just contribution, just to go into like how AI can also, not just on mangrove side, but there are also organizations in the Philippines that uses, cameras underwater and collect data of, faster collection of fish and getting all the results rather than the divers go there and conduct more assessments. So this one is also a partnership between, a data science company. So in the Philippines, most of the AI work is really a partnership between, an academe or a private sector and sometimes an NGO. So, but definitely there's more things to do, such as putting more finance on developing these tools and collecting data.
And so as AI tools become more prominent in conservation, how can we ensure that local communities actively benefit from the data and the insights generated, rather than just serving as external stakeholders or people we're extracting data from? Like how do we move away from that model of conservation and application of AI? Gabrielle, I'd love to hear from you first, but Camilla, if you've got thoughts, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I would say that for us, the very first step, and that is like non-negotiable, and I would say it's that like the basis like of all our project is to open up the data that we collect. So all the data that we're collecting, for example, at the moment within the mangroves will be published in a few months and will be free, like will be open. So anybody, local communities, NGOs, local governments, central government, researchers can use this data. I can use like our soon to be published biomass data set. And I think for us it's a very, very important part to like make sure that like local stakeholders can also take advantage of this data. But I would say it's not sufficient enough, because sometimes you
Yeah.
can just publish the data set, but like how can you be sure that local NGOs or like local communities we use, I'm not sure that, for example, the local communities we're working with, it's a Sandra, will go on a Hugging Face to like download or like CSV with the biomass, like so we need also to make sure that we develop also like capacity building, and also we try to empower local communities to understand the value of this data. For example, to assist them to develop a carbon finance project, for example, so they really understand what is the value and what they can get out of this data set. And I would say the other thing is that we are very proud in Data 354 to say that our tool is really made in Côte d'Ivoire. So we're in Côte d'Ivoire based company. The tool is built with Ivorian data. It's built with like Ivorian engineers, data scientists that are trained at in Côte d'Ivoire at a very good university called INPHB. And we are also focusing on like Ivorian challenges at Data 354. So I think it's very important to have this local ownership as well with the tool we develop.
Camille, anything to add?
Yeah, Yeah, just to also support what Gabrielle said. So in the project that we do, apart from really doing the whole capacity training, I think the best thing to do to have the sustainability is to create the ordinance and the framework to be included that in the local government, right? So part of the project that we do is that we collect the data. The most important thing is to give back to the community. So the communities that we train, they already know how to collect them. And now part of the project is to train 3 more organizations to be able to amplify more work. So we're going to train 3 more NGOs, and then they will be amplifying their own communities. But there are so many interests already from the local government that this definitely the mangrove monitoring tools will help them. So they wanted to have an ordinance to use this tool for their own environmental officer. So I think creating that would be the first step for sustainability in the projects that we do in the sites, for example. Yeah.
Interesting. So tech dependence, does AI complement or replace traditional knowledge in your opinion? What role do local communities play in decision making regarding the technological integration? Camille, that's for you.
Okay. I thought it was
Sorry.
like, okay, maybe definitely
Go between.
definitely complementary. So there were so many lessons and failures that we've already learned and between with the community. So for AI, it's good in terms of it's automating analysis. For example, it can speed up data collection, it can improve data accuracy, it can check everything faster than traditional method, but it can also, especially with the climate impacts right now, it can predict changes from historical collection and then the data collection. But I think what AI lacks is the access in the Philippines. There are some areas in the Philippines, and especially in the project sites that we work with, that do not have internet access and tech literacy, and also have financial resources. We still have lack of financial resources to conduct trainings, to conduct data collection, and also like a lot of lacking on what is AI. A lot of coastal communities don't even know that yet, especially they don't have cell phones. Just a cell phone is they don't have, right? And again, the last I would say is there's also the consent. So when we conduct data collection, we do have to ask communities, those data privacy is part of the Philippines. We have this data privacy, but there needs to be an ethical consent wherein who owns the data, right? So the community should be part of the ownership, and especially the decision making and the control of the data should be controlled also by the communities. And I think that for sure, if we can co-design it with the local communities and they have enabling environment to be able to do something like internet, cell phone, and we can deploy, we can scale faster. But however, it's still complementary. It's not going to solve systemic issues. It's not gonna solve social injustices in conservation. It will definitely complement some other factors like just data accuracy and some needs like in the science field. But yeah, that's what I can say about that.
I think it's a really important point that tech, AI, whatever type of tech we're talking about, whether it's AI, whether it's a camera trap or when you're talking about in the context of conservation, it is not the silver bullet. Like it is not the thing that's going to solve anything. It's a magnifier, and it can help accelerate and improve interventions, but it's not the one thing that's going to fix everything. And so I'm seeing some comments come in from participants in the chat, just like wondering, should we be thinking about how much technology is actually needed? And I think it's a really, really important question. Is AI the thing that we should be deploying at every single project at every single level? Maybe not. Like, I think it is a really complex issue, and I think going back to the first point, like AI is not off the shelf yet. It takes a huge amount of investment, not just to collect the data, but to work with communities and think through ethical issues. And it is complex and it can have a huge role to play, but like, you know, it's not as simple as as taking it just out of the box, right? But before we continue with our discussion, I would love to do a little quick fire round with the audience. And so I'm going to read out a series of statements about AI and conservation, and you need to react fast, okay? Everyone listening, you need to react fast and use Zoom's agree or disagree reactions. If you're unsure, you can stay neutral, but don't overthink. Just go with your gut. Okay, ready? Let's go. AI, first question, AI, first statement. AI-driven conservation empowers local communities. Agree, disagree? I don't know how this works. Does it pop up as a reaction? Do I read them all out and then it comes up? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Okay. Second statement. AI is creating a new form of data colonialism in conservation. AI can help address land rights and governance failures in conservation. AI is just a tool. The real challenge is who decides how to use it. Oh, I can comment a bit between state. Not sure. Agree. Agree. Okay. AI should be fully open access, even if it risks misuse and misinterpretation. What do we think? Not sure. Agree, not likely. Disagree, not sure. Well, that was a controversial statement. Okay. Disagree, not sure. Some clear divides. And AI is just a tool. The real challenge is who decides how to use it. And finally, conservation doesn't need AI. Alternative approaches work just as well or better. Disagree. Okay, interesting. Half. Disagree. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do, okay, not sure. Interesting. Okay. So bit of mix of feelings around those different issues. So we've seen okay. So let's dig deeper into some of these key issues with our panelists. So first question, AI for whom? Who controls the data? How can communities truly access and use AI-powered insights? What do you guys think? Camille, you looked a little twitchy. Do you want to take it first?
Yeah. I think, I think there has to be both. There has to be both agreements. I would say like data sharing agreements for the data, because I work a lot with communities. Definitely they need to know what is happening. They need to know, they need to have control of the data, but it needs to be hand in hand to who decides on policies, for example, or who decides on things that's happening there. And especially in the Philippines, it's a very hierarchical, society where it's a lot of top-down approach. It's very decentralized in terms of like, deciding, right? And I think I've seen a lot of organizations working together, such as, Gainforest is working with Amazon communities, and the data is owned by the Amazonian communities, but I think there has to be that data sharing agreement. And who contributes to that knowledge and policy has to be really, really good. If the governance is weak, I don't think it will solve anything. Yes.
We've heard from so many projects that actually talking about these things before the project starts is so important, and putting in place things like data sharing agreements and having it written up and having it be considered before you start is just really best practice for how you deal with some of these ethical issues, and it just can make like the conversation happen. So I guess the question is like, where do you get a data sharing agreement? Where did you guys get yours? Did you just develop one, or have you found there's resources online for you guys that you were able to lean on?
Is it for me?
Yeah, that was for you.
Sorry,
Yeah.
because there was a
Because
cut.
there was a follow-up question. Yeah.
No, so there's when we work with the data science company, they do give that they do give it to us, and then we have to review it. So there is supposed to be like an agreement together with an NGO, and of course then we share it to the communities. So it has to be all aligned. Everyone is aligned on what's being shared or not.
Yeah. Gabrielle, any comments to add there, or should I move on to the next question?
No, yeah. So regarding question about how can communities like access and use like this AI powered insights, I would say that it's very very important to make sure that the data is understandable and they can access it. So because for example with the tool we are developing, I'm not sure because there is like such so big issue in Ivory Coast with the digital divide, with the lack of like internet infrastructures in some region. I'm not sure, that some people at the local level, at the village level, can access our tool and can use this tool. Um, but we need to make sure that the local communities are, empowered so they can have access to this data. So, for example, we are conducting, this field trip and this biomass estimation in the region of Sassandra. And our goal is that at the end of the field collection is to go back to the village to share the results, to share also like even like a printed biomass maps of the mangroves in the area, so they get an access to this data and they can understand also the value of it.
So how do we avoid AI-driven data colonialism? Like where data is extracted but not returned to communities? Like I guess you've talked a little bit about going back to community. I would say not just communities but governments and like it's a regional thing as well, right? So how do we avoid AI-driven data colonialism? Gabrielle, do you want to take it?
No, I mean, I would say that I think Cami gave like a very interesting, example of that, like having these data sharing agreements, which I think is also key to avoid this, data colonialism, like to make sure like of who owns the data. Because I'm also like I would say a strong supporter of like open source data, but I know that sometimes open source that can be also some tension with local communities because like the data will be freely accessible for like everybody, and some people can take advantage of this data, which that won't be part of the local community. So we also need to make sure that like there are empowers. So I would say like a data sharing agreement, as mentioned by Kabila, is key. And yeah.
Yeah. It's if anyone in the audience is kind of interested in going deeper in this level, like in this issue, I think Jocelyn, what's Jocelyn's last? Because someone dropped Jocelyn's like a link to Jocelyn's work in the chat. We were hoping she was going to join this conversation. She wasn't able to be here today, but she's been doing some really fascinating work working with communities, not just coming in and saying, I need this data and these are the AI tools we're building, but actually co-designing the questions and training the communities in actually the AI, building the AI and owning it, and the power dynamic and the shift of ownership and knowledge is like so different and a couple of steps beyond just, oh, we should have data sharing agreements, or we need this and we'll come and tell you about it. It's really, I think there's a spectrum here of how we can work with communities. Camille, do you want to talk about that?
We were doing some projects on migratory birds and mangroves. And I think one specific thing there is that in the Philippines, there's a lot of wildlife trade, illegal wildlife trade that's happening, right? And definitely I do support open source, but in terms of this kind of level where we know there's a lot of biodiversity challenges and, trading that's happening in the Philippines, those are the things that I am really scared as well. Like, I don't want that to be shared. Definitely, like exactly those coordinates cannot be shared because these are the wildlife that's in the Philippines and being traded, right? And definitely, yeah. And apart from the data sharing, definitely you have to ask with the local communities, what do they need? Is it even feasible? Because there are moments, there are AI tools, there are like projects that are entering communities and they never ask the communities if is it feasible or not. Do they have cell phones? And in our case, we realized that in the local communities that we work with, and most of them are 50 years old above, most of them have a hard time using smartphones, and only 25% have smartphones. So that there's a huge gap in like even collecting data, and exactly what you mentioned, Stephanie, you need to know what is the need of the communities, and then they have to be part of the co-designing of a project.
I think it's I think when you're thinking on a project by project basis, like these issues are a little bit easier to unpick because it's like person to person, or the boundaries are clearer. But when you scale up to regional, national, global levels, the questions become a lot trickier, and about how to manage those interactions. Who owns it, and how do we like, and like conservation does not stop at like these easy boundaries, right? Like how do we work together, and like data sharing is really necessary to piece together the picture of the ecosystems that we need at a systemic level. I think this is just not an easy solve, but having these conversations and thinking it through are really, really important. And so I guess my next question is like, can AI solve structural problems? Like, does AI address land use issues? I'm going to say no, flat out. Does AI address land use issues, governance failures, and funding gaps, or just provide technical fixes? What a question. What do you guys think? Gabrielle, do you want to take a swing at that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Like as we like explained like at the beginning of the discussion, we are really at the beginning of like something, but we are like building like this AI tool at the moment, and it would be too, how can I say, yeah, no, I mean it would be too um I would be too confident to say that AI is solving like such structural problems, such as like for example land rights. We know that for example in Ivory Coast there is a very there are like some issues with like rural land ownership, but there is no such tools, such like AI tools that help to solve these kind of issues. No, but then again, yes, AI can help. Uh, it can help on like to it can't enforce laws, it can't fix like a broken governance, for example. But regarding climate action, of course, like it can like highlight like forest loss, as we said, like protected areas and things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's solved like structural problem.
Yeah.
I think just to like push back a little bit, I think, are you thinking about AI from the perspective of like applications in processing satellite imagery and like its its role in like the sort of platforms you're building? Is that what you have
Yeah,
in
yes.
mind?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I would actually push back in that like I think has a AI, ML, whatever, like the broadest brush of like definitions for what we're talking about here. I think there's some really interesting like I think in conservation, and like I've been in the tech space for like the last 10 years and talking to people about AI for 10 years. And I think in conservation, the focus of ML and AI applications is very much been focused on this um processing imagery, like speeding up how we deal with like identifying animals in camera traps or satellite imagery, or like maybe a little bit of, we're seeing more applications of processing and like movement data. But there's also, I think, like all of the generative AI and like the stuff that's been emerging and like really changing other sectors in the last year, I don't think we're really like grappling with yet, and or even just thinking about. And I'm really interested to see like the AI applications in the legal frameworks and like the role it can play in helping not solve these problems about governance or governance failures or land right issues, but it does have a role to play in like speeding up, trolling through legal documents and like helping get the information more accessible so that we can then use it to go and make different arguments. Like this is by no means my area of expertise, but I think there is a role to play that, and like I think the one thing to take away for the audience is that AI is not in conservation is not just about how do we get better at monitoring ecosystems. There are a whole range of ways that AI is going to change how our sector is operating. And I think we are absolutely on the back foot, and like a lot of work needs to happen and a lot of attention needs to be paid here for how it's changing our sector without a lot of people really realizing. Camille, what do you think?
Yeah, just to what you mentioned earlier, like it can check. So for me, for the application part on the ground, like definitely it can speed up decision making for sure. It can give us decision like, oh, this part here is being a land grab or illegal logging, but definitely it doesn't solve the systemic issues that's happening on the ground. It can, however, strengthen maybe a legal claim that a community is trying to do, like what you mentioned, Stephanie. Like it may the AI can serve as a or it can support maybe the legal framework. Like there's a lot of policies in the Philippines that a lot of conservationists, a lot of lawyers, and there's so many paperworks happening. But how do we find those Republic Acts? How do we find those? It's hard to search them really fast. So in order for, I think that's where AI can help communities like claim something that's been grabbed to them, informed land rights policies, more amplification. So we use it as a supporting, as an advocacy tool, but not to solve issues, because if governance is really weak, I don't think AI can solve anything.
I'm seeing some really interesting comments from the chat, so I'm going to read a few out so like our live stream and everyone else can see them. But Catherine Monk was comment, funding gaps. If AI improves the production and speed of evidence mapping, then it will increase the identification of evidence gaps and improve targeting of funding. I also think there's a role for AI to play in matchmaking between funders, because like at the moment, like a lot of the funding is like relationship dependent. So I wonder, I'm really interested to see how it changes like that interaction between funders and fundees, and like of course also the role of like AI and like helping write applications and like perhaps creating barriers, but also potentially breaking down barriers. It's going to be really interesting to see. Louis says AI is great for pattern recognition. It provides objective info. If everyone agrees on the validity of the models, and it can facilitate dialogue based on shared information. Yeah, like getting on the same page, agreed. Dr. Anrudi says, even if AI can't solve structural issues, it can spotlight the gaps. Completely agree. Like amplifying local voices and supporting fairer systems if guided by justice, not by algorithms. And like there were a lot of people agreeing with that as well. And so I guess the question is like, how do we prevent AI from reinforcing inequalities in conservation? Like, what do you guys think? Camille, do you want to take it first?
I think I've mentioned it earlier, like having who owns kind of the data. I think communities at the same time, it has to be together. It has to be a shared agreement. Who has the legal control? Also having fair data agreements and making sure it's ethical. And making sure that the communities have a voice in how to use it, what to show, what not to show. And I like what you mentioned about the Joycelyn, like really understanding what's the need of the communities in order to create this huge scale programs. But I think I would say what really can solve, how AI can solve this, a lot of issues in conservation, but really there needs to be a lot of training and capacity building with communities, like how to interpret. I think that was a really good thing that in the comment, like there are, and we come across this a lot as well, there are misinformation too that's happening in the conservation world, and it would be nice if AI can help filter misinformation. It has given us some information, but it has to counteract what are the not good information. But then again, there's also some low-tech technologies low technologies that would be able to use that are offline would be the best case in the communities, because there's a lot of places in the Philippines that we don't have access to internet. Like I would have a hard time using that as well. But definitely most of these projects and anything that scales up regionally and globally should really have local leaders and local council, I would say, a local data council that in all stages of implementation and design, they have to be included on it.
I think this is also just a huge role for partnerships as well and
Yeah.
collaboration, and that like partnerships with the tech industry, partnership with academia is like the way forward as well. And so for the last 10 years, I've led Wild Labs, which is if anyone's looking for technology support, Wild Labs is a global community, an online
Yeah, well,
platform
that's
for
nice.
innovation tech. And you can go there and find answers and connect with people with heaps of events. So it's a really good resource. But as part of that, we worked a lot with Google and Dan Morris, who's a wonderful champion for AI and AI applications in nature. And we worked with him to run office hours for AI for conservation. And I sat in many hours of him giving advice to conservationists trying to use AI in their work. And he systematically would go through every possible option for not using AI before he would say, okay, in this situation, you may go forward and use like, here's how you would build your own tool. Because like the time you like in many situations right now, this may change in the next few years, like, and it's changing very quickly, but like in so many situations, the time you invest in trying to make a model work for you is like is not worth it. And so I think we've said this like many times, but like AI is still has a lot of hype around it, and there is a lot of
Yeah.
potential for conservationists to waste time here. And I think people like Gabrielle and what you guys are building, I think there are a lot of examples in conservation of platforms being built and partnerships with the tech sector to bring these tools into conservation. But us trying to do this from scratch, I don't know if is the way. I really think collaboration and finding ways to work with tools that exist is really, really
Oh, yeah.
important. But I want to look to the future now as we're wrapping up. Oh, I thought I had an extra 10 minutes. Whoops. Sorry to the moderator, to the people running the session. I thought we might go a few minutes over. We'll talk about the future just for a second. Future of AI and open access. What are the policy or funding changes that are needed to ensure AI benefits? What needs to change to ensure AI benefits local communities? Or are there, let me ask that question. What changes need to happen? Gabrielle, do you want to have a crack at it?
Okay, so maybe like to answer this question, I can also talk about like a project that we're gonna launch in Senegal very soon. So I would say so we're gonna work like hand in hand with donors to build a data product for like the Senegalese government to assess biomass in forest within Senegal. And what we will do is like we're going to partner with like local university to develop some capacity like geospatial like capacity building like or workshops with local universities, local students who are going to work. And I think this may be, the kind of like future or like kind of partnership that should be like in place to ensure that, AI also benefits local communities. So we're really gonna work like hand in hand with local actors, with the Ministry of Environment in Senegal, with like the Gaston Berger University. We're also going to work with a local company to do the field collection. And I think it's very important, especially for, funders to like promote this kind of partnership. And I would also say that, yeah, long-term like capacity building workshop is very key.
Agreed. Okay, I would love us to, I'm going to give everyone a chance to wrap up your thoughts and give our audience one key message to take away about AI's role in restoration. Camille, do you want to have the first thought?
Yeah. I think just to have my final thought about AI is that, as an NGO practitioner and also doing a lot of mangrove rehabilitation, AI can definitely help scale up restoration efforts, like understanding where are these areas, but there must be a paired investment in social side. I think in a very specific sense, I would say, funding that goes into the training of local rangers, supporting, indigenous communities and ensuring there's community governance on the data that is being, collected. And I think our communities have already observed so many environmental patterns and a lot of changes in their own, locality, and we just need to integrate AI, with the local ecological knowledge that they have already to make better decisions. And it has to be more complementary. And that's what I can say.
Gabriel, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, so my final thought, I would say that we're really like at the beginning of something new. But I know that from experience that we're not there yet with like fully functional AI products. And also, I really want to emphasize on the fact that I would say like depending where we are in the world, we're really gonna face like different issues. I know, for example, that there are like much more advanced AI model to monitor like forest deforestation in South America, but it's not the case in West Africa because when we build our model, we need to calibrate with local data, and we lack so much data, and data collection is such expensive. So I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Lacuna Fund, because at Data 354 we're like Lacuna Fund grantee, and so they finance us to collect this data within the mangroves. But I would say, yeah, that's okay. We're at the beginning of something, but I hope that we get, more funding to collect data, to calibrate our models, so it can like be useful for like local communities.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing your time and your thoughts and your experience. And thank you to the community here as well. The comments and interactions that are happening in the chat are really interesting, and I think it's going to be setting the stage for part 2 of this session. So stay tuned. I'm going to hand it back to our organizing team, but thank you very much to our speakers.
Thank you so much to everyone watching for being so incredibly active and engaged in the chat. Thank you so much, Stephanie, Camille, and Gabrielle, for sharing your insights in this truly engaging discussion. It was wonderful to hear what communities are doing, what the challenges are, and how we can enable communities to not only collect the data and be active participants in the data that is being collected by them in their territories, but also to receive the benefits from the work that they are doing. So thank you so much once again to the audience watching us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, to everyone on Zoom being super active, and of course, to the speakers of session 1. So before we move on, let's take a quick break, a quick stretch break. I hope you're enjoying this event and are ready for session 2. We are now going to move on to widen a bit our scope to see how we can build cross-sectoral partnerships to scale these solutions and to highlight the local communities, the local actors that are that are behind the development of inclusive AI tools. But before we do move on with session 2, I want to invite you to our upcoming event. If you want to learn more about the latest AI conservation solutions, community-led tech innovations, and the tools to bridge the global digital divide, join us at the GLF Forest 2025 Hybrid Conference, Defining the Next Decade of Action, happening online, so you can also join from wherever you are, and in Bonn, Germany. If you want to learn more, you can register there on the link that's being shared in the chat, learn more about our event, and yeah, get ready to talk not only about the latest AI innovations, but also about rights and livelihoods, nature and climate finance, how we can sow a thriving forest bioeconomy, and of course, put in practice inclusive forest policies. So you can register now. Thank you so much. And let's get ready for session 2 after this quick video break.
What if we told you that one of the biggest climate solutions is right in front of us? Forests. They store carbon, protect biodiversity, and sustain millions of lives. But they're under threat like never before. And the choices we make today will shape the next decade and beyond. So, what's next? On April 24, GLF Forests will bring together scientists, indigenous leaders, policymakers, and everyday changemakers to take real action for our forests. Learn from groundbreaking research and on-the-ground experience. Connect with hundreds around the world working on real solutions. And turn great ideas into action. This is more than just a conference. It's a call to action. Join the movement. Join GLF Forests.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Revati and I hope you'll all join us at GLF Forest and you've been enjoying session 1 so far. We're gonna move on to session 2. I don't know about you, but I've really been enjoying the discussion so far. We've seen really deep philosophical thoughts come out and practical examples of how AI is being used in conservation. So we know that it can be a powerful tool, but we've also seen how implementation raises critical challenges. Camille and Stephanie have talked about data sharing, consent agreements, and also how they become complicated as we think about scaling them up. So we're going to dive deeper into that into our session now here. At the end of the discussion, we'll answer your questions. So if you have any questions, please continue asking them. I see all of your discussions and inputs on the chat, as well as in the Q&A box. If you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, add your questions in the chat. Our team is looking at it actively and will share them with us, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. So we've seen in session 1 on different policy shifts that people have talked about and how it's non-trivial and not simple when you think about how communities don't just collect data, but they're active participants, as well as what that the ethics of creating an AI solution that for conservation that really takes community into account means not just at a local level, but as you look into the regional level and global level and so on. How do you take equity into account, and how do you keep risks in mind, bias in mind? So I'm really excited that today on our panel to go deeper into this with extensive experience, we have our 2 speakers. So we have Gabriel Nunes, Latin America's delegate for Gain Forest Data Council on Indigenous ChatGPT development, and Ellie Copeland, who's a member of UNESCO's Ethics of AI unit. A very warm welcome to both of you, Gabriel and Ellie. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to start with some perspectives from both of you on this topic. And let's start with you, Ellie. Tell us more about your work and maybe just a quick perspective on this topic to start off with.
Sure, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today to discuss this important topic of AI for the planet. So, as mentioned, I am here in my capacity as a member of UNESCO's Ethics of AI unit. So I'm really delighted to share some of our work in this area. So as we all know, AI is having a really significant impact on our environment and ecosystems. Calculations show that just training one single large language model is the equivalent to emitting around 300,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide. However, as has been discussed, what is particularly concerning is that the adverse environmental impacts of AI often disproportionately burden already vulnerable communities and regions. So, for instance, in 2022, one of the big tech companies operated its data center in Finland on 97% carbon-free energy, whereas in Asia, this number dropped to between 4 to 18%. So my question today is, what exactly can we do about this? So UNESCO member states were actually early to recognize some of these challenges and unanimously adopted the UNESCO recommendation of the ethics of AI in 2021. So this framework remains actually the only global standard to date calling for the development and deployment of AI systems which are in line with human rights and fundamental freedoms. And actually of particular significance to our conversation today, one of the 4 core values that the recommendation is centered on is environmental and ecosystem flourishing. But beyond just values and principles, the recommendation includes 11 policy action areas that all 194 member states have committed to implementing. So if I take the example of policy action area 5, which is aptly environment and ecosystems, this calls for member states to firstly assess the direct and indirect environmental impact of AI throughout its life cycle. And that's including, but not limited to, its carbon footprint, energy consumption, and impact on raw material extraction. Secondly, to introduce incentives to ensure that the development and adoption of ethical AI-powered solutions for environmental monitoring and disaster risk resilience. And thirdly, and incredibly importantly, to adopt the principle of proportionality. And that means recognizing when necessary, we must refrain from using AI if its environmental harm is disproportionate. But this really leads me to my key question: how can we actually translate ethical principles into practice? And here, I'd just like to highlight one key area of UNESCO's work focusing on implementation, and that's the UNESCO Readiness Assessment methodology, otherwise known as the RAM. So the RAM is actually a diagnostic tool which supports policymakers to analyze their AI ecosystems and develop tailored policy solutions to improve their AI readiness. And UNESCO is actually currently working with over 60 member states to implement the RAM, including 12 small island developing states, 22 countries in Africa, and 15 countries in the LAC region. So a key dimension of the RAM is actually the social and cultural dimension, which asks countries questions about their environmental sustainability policies. For example, is there a specific consideration for the impact of AI on land and water use? And is an environmental impact assessment mandatory before using AI in certain cases? The outcomes of the RAM have shown actually that overwhelmingly and globally, there is actually a real lack of policy addressing the environmental impacts of AI. However, I will say that the RAM is guiding countries to make this change. For example, if we take the example of Chile, the RAM actually included several actions to attract investment in AI technological infrastructure and to promote discussions on the environmental impacts. So these included for the likes of establishing a working group within government to investigate the environmental impacts of AI on the country. Secondly, designing and implementing a regulatory sandbox to pilot measures for protecting, mitigating, and remediating the implementation of high energy consuming AI models. And then thirdly, establishing research funds focusing on the environmental impacts of large AI models. So following the publication of the RAM, Chile actually updated its national AI strategy to align with these goals. And recently, a local court in Chile reversed the permit of a major tech company from building more data centers, citing environmental concerns. And this court actually requested that the company resubmit their proposal to consider these factors. So just to conclude for my opening remarks, I'd say that the protection of the planet really is at the heart of UNESCO's recommendation of the ethics of AI. However, kind of our early analysis shows a real lack of global policies addressing this issue. And I'd just like to say real change can happen in the implementation of the recommendation, as has been discussed in part one of this session, by working with local stakeholders to turn principles into action. Thank you.
Amazing. We couldn't have gotten a better intro to the session. Thanks, Ellie. And I think that leads us very nicely to Gabrielle to give us a quick intro and maybe give us a little bit more of also the other perspective from the community and the innovators and so on the topic.
Okay, hello everyone. Great pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Gabriel. I'm from the Brazilian Amazon. I've learned from riverine communities from here. And the work of Game Forest on data is relating on creating what we call technolocalities. what would be technologicality? It's actually technology solutions for the problems of the communities. So we always tackle and always partner with communities around the world, traditional communities, on how we can integrate traditional knowledge, data, and a little bit of technology, just to say, because the technology part is actually the hint is just a sprinkle of it. Because what actually is important is how the community is facing that problem. What's the problem in the community? What they're actually trying to solve? How can we use the technology in creating new solutions for solving the problems of the communities? Because if you're gonna see the community, each community have a different situation, especially here in Amazon. I'm gonna focus a little bit on Amazon because it's where I live and the community that I'm part of. So I've become a little biased just from my perspective. How can we use those technologies which to serve the benefits of the community? So just to give quick examples, because it seems too broad when we say this. Okay, but using technology for the communities, how we do it? So, for example, we partner with the communities to solve their problems. So, and here in the Amazon, we have communities that the majority of communities are extractivists. If they are riverine, just like my communities, they are extractivists. With the indigenous communities, they are a little bit different. But in the extractive communities, all our communities, they may not know how to read and write it, but they know how to read nature. And in that world over there, in new knowledge and new readings, we are the ignorance. Our intention is to capture the traditional knowledge on ecosystem, traditional eco knowledge that they have, and integrate for solving solutions. So, for example, we have a lot of trees called ushi here that actually are really good resource for the communities as in feeding, as fruits for feeding. But they are extractivists that when we go on the jungle and try to collect those fruits, sometimes the fruit's not ripe. Sometimes we find a tree that has actually been fell off. So we spend a lot of time, like 5 days on the jungle, trying to collect the fruits to distribute them on the communities. One of the solutions that we created is actually using the traditional knowledge of the communities on how the leaves change colors close to fruiting. So they actually train using their knowledge. They say, look, Gabriel, I think this tree here is actually 3 months are getting the fruit ripe. So we use this knowledge to train to train the ML model, or depending on the situation, training other things, to train an ML model to identify how long it takes for the trees that they want to be ripened. Now they have kind of a pathway saying, look, okay, we have to go to this tree, to this tree, to this tree, to this tree. The other trees you don't have to go because the model is saying actually they lack 2 weeks before they're ripe. This is an example of how in using technology and traditional knowledge, they can create solutions to solving the problems of the community. And this is what the expertise of game forest. It's hard to say something. We create solutions, but the solutions are always really tailor-made to what the community needs. So that's why the problem on working on communities, that the business market expects us to be scalable. Everything expects things to be scalable, but among indigenous communities and among riverine communities, scalability, as in business models, as everybody understands scalability, like unicorn, is not feasible. So to digital solutions for community, is always have to be a peculiarity because everything is different from one community from another. And our job is exactly this: partner, understanding your challenges, and co-creating solutions, which always have a hint of technology, but always the technology is not the protagonist. The protagonist is always the people, is always the traditional knowledge of the people and how they interact with nature, how they see nature, how they reflect nature their own values. This is our specialty. We approach it in several ways, but this is our core values on how to tackle technology communities.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That's super insightful, and I wonder, Ellie, I think this is going to be a rich discussion because both of you bring really different perspectives to the table. And I wonder, following up on what you were talking about, Gabrielle, in terms of how we ensure that AI solutions are really adaptable to the communities and the indigenous wisdom that they hold, the particular local political, cultural context and the landscape. I wonder, Ellie, your take on it, given the work that UNESCO does with the ethics of AI, and the work and how it works with the local and regional policymakers and beyond. What has your experience been in terms of how global ethical frameworks can be adapted to address the unique challenges and make sure that they're locally relevant?
Yes, thank you. And Gabrielle, that was a super interesting talk. I completely agree. I think my perspective on this is that engagement with local communities and local stakeholders is everything and so valuable. That's definitely kind of the perspective and the motivation behind implementing the RAM assessment at UNESCO is to really work with countries and local stakeholders and communities, so that it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all solution in terms of AI policy, which is then going to be implemented. So if I could take the example with, say, Côte d'Ivoire, where the RAM has been implemented, actually, I think it was around over 1,300 local stakeholders were consulted in this process, because as we know, kind of having a standard one-size-fits-all is not how effective AI policy is going to work. And as Gabrielle highlighted so wonderfully with his examples, local knowledge is so important to make sure that AI systems are effective and also are going to be used by the local communities. They have to, as was highlighted in session 1 as well, local communities have to know how to use the AI system, how to use it effectively. And I do believe that co-creation and working closely with a range of stakeholders is important for this process.
Lovely. Thanks, Ellie. Just building on the discussion, I'm just gonna leave the table open for both of you to jump in whenever you want. And maybe let me just pepper the discussion with this initial thought on considering both of your perspectives, both from the global policy level and the local working with indigenous communities level. What global frameworks or regulations are needed to ensure that AI aligns with biodiversity and climate goals? And how was the current status of the ecosystem? What do we need to do to get to a place where it's desirable for us?
I'm happy to come in here again. I mean, obviously coming from UNESCO, probably a global framework, which I can point to is the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI. But actually a little bit more concretely, as I was discussing in my opening remarks, I think the results of the RAM kind of really do point us to the need for clearer and standardized methods for measuring AI's impact on the planet. And this would really support the creation of more national policies, because, you know, as I alluded to, the RAM results are showing us that there's this lack of policy about how to envisage the impact of AI on the environment and what to do with that. So if I may just take the opportunity as well then to discuss one other area of work which UNESCO is doing in this space, which is that we're currently working with the French Ministry of Ecological Transition as well as the International Standards Organization to develop a comprehensive roadmap for creating standards to actually enable member states to assess and mitigate the environmental impacts of AI. And this will include a few areas, so kind of creating actionable guidance on how to measure and reduce AI's environmental impact, as well as exploring how to implement safeguards and transparency measures, and also working on requirements that would establish having to have justifications for using AI in certain areas. So I'd really suggest that kind of looking forward, like a big area that would be useful for all of us to focus and work on is the creation of this international standard that will allow us to more easily be able to measure the environmental impact of AI.
Amazing. That's very exciting. And I have a confession here to make, right? Our internal policy and ethics guidelines on AI and all of that, like we've been highly influenced by UNESCO's work on the ethics of AI and what you do. So there's also personal interest in this question, considering the width and breadth of everyone who might be watching this session and the kind of work that Game Forest does. What kind of cross-sector collaboration do you think is needed to take AI ethics to the next level that's needed? What role should governments and NGOs, the private sector, all of them play in making AI more accessible, more fair? And I'd love both of your perspectives on this. And maybe let's start with you, Gabrielle, and then I'll go on to Ellie, or feel free to jump in at any point.
Perfect. To give you just a perspective of what is Amazonian is, what being an Amazonian is that we feel that normally people from outside Amazonia see Amazonia as a green carpet, endless carpet of trees, or the biggest hotspot of biodiversity in the world. But below those trees lives a people. Lives a people that knows how to deal with nature for centuries and maybe thousands of years. When we talk about conservation, when we talk about AI or anything related to environment, those things are not separated from the socio-economic. So we normally tend to think conservation as conservation of the trees, or conservation of the animals, or restoration or protection. And we never think about the protection of the people who has been for thousands of years actually conserving the forest. So the partnerships, they are great, but our problems are not partnerships. It's a problem of concept, a concept of mind, in a situation where we are expecting things from nature without considering the people that live with nature. And that's one of the biggest problems here in the Amazon is the opportunity cost. A lot of people, actually, even in my people, they turn to deforestation because they don't have another income way of living. So the partnership for me is the least problem of this. Is actually how can you incorporate our view of what is important? You are monitoring things that are not important for us. Everybody's expecting the biodiversity index, the conservation index, although GBF lows, even they are not adapted to us. I'm an invertebrate specialist as a biologist, but I have to ask myself, are invertebrates important for the community? So to create an index to transform local action into global goals, we did the incorporation of our perspective on the game. When we use, for example, I don't know, ChatGPT or DeepSeek or any other information, like search information, from things that are important for us, we found zero. Zero, even for the things that are most common for us being important. Fruits and things that are like common knowledge for us. So then they must know that Citrus doesn't find. So we are perpetuating things like global, like ChatGPT, like new AIs. It's a new form of knowledge that is arising and ever increasing. We are getting information from this large language model even further and advancing. But when we try to find our information, it doesn't exist. We're kind of perpetuating a system where we are outscattered, where our knowledge is outscattered because it's not considered. So when I think about if AI is a problem, I never think things are a problem. I think we are the problem and the solution. AI is a tool. Conservation is a tool. Everything is a tool. Technology is a tool. Even electricity is a tool. But until we approach things as in a corporation of conservation as a socio-economic problem, not only an environmental problem, it doesn't matter which partnerships, it doesn't matter which global policies, because the policies are not ours. And ever growing, the situation is getting worse. because our interests are not included in what defines the global knowledge. Maybe for them, the most important is a sacred bird, which are not a good indicator for biodiversity index, but it has a hell of good indicator for them. So the partnership itself is not necessarily what I think is important, but a concept of trying to understand that things have to come from bottom up, not top bottom, from the people who are living the problem, from the people who've been living the problem and knows how to deal with conservation since the beginning of time. We also want collaborations, but we want more partners who respect people who made themselves here, people who made themselves speech, people who, and not necessarily the partner. The partner, it has to come helping, trying to understand us, not to say what we need or trying to solve a problem that we actually don't have. It actually happens a lot. I'm sorry to taking this long for this answer. It's just that it's just this.
If I could just come in on this question as well, I think what Gabrielle's just noted there about bottom approaches is like the essence of what we're talking about today. So on this question, one of the things that I had noted was the need to provide more funding for the development of local solutions. And this is something that UNESCO is actively partnering with development banks to be able to provide this funding. Because as you said, kind of ChatGPT might not have, or these big large AI models might not have the information that is grounded in the local context. And so to be able to have the funding to develop local solutions, one thing that we're actively looking at the moment is a partnership with the Icelandic government, looking at the creation of LLMs, which are grounded in more local and indigenous languages. And so I think that's a really, I just wanted to emphasize a really important point is bottom-up approaches are fundamental, and I think to get there as well, funding is fundamental.
Love that. We need to have people at the center of it all. And I love the comments here. Our interests are not included in the search of global knowledge, Gabriel Nunes. And that funding is important. We need bottom-up approaches. We need local first approaches. Just changing tracks a little bit, taking a step back on the role of AI itself in conservation and biodiversity and climate efforts. Are we then saying that, the people there have been doing it anyway for so long? We know what we're doing. So are we overly reliant on AI at this point? Do we need it at all? And if so, are there non-AI solutions that we should be prioritizing equally? Go for it.
Morelli for me. Okay. I think just like any tool, it doesn't have to be mandatory or not. As somebody told you, AI is not something that is off the shelf. It's something everybody is creating. It's new for everybody. Let's face it. Nobody necessarily is actually doing this. We are proof of concepting things here. You guys too new. But if you don't tackle in the beginning what are the uses and how the possibilities of them uses, you're gonna follow the same path as serving only a small percentage of the world that is localized in the global north. So when we do a search, for example, there's a study for Reserdo in 2024 that shows that when we use those tools to search for things, they always only incorporate the perspective of the global north, always US and Europe. So again, without skirting this, but the tools, we don't need to necessarily use AI in all of those, but our intention is to try to find a use of AI that could help. If there's nothing that AI could use to help a community, that's okay. We can try to find any other solution. But like any other tool, you decide. Yeah, I don't see AI as a silver bullet of anything. I don't actually see any tool as a silver bullet. I don't think there is a solution for anything. I think we are the solution. We are trying to always construct things, but not changing ourselves. We always try to construct new things, trying to put a band-aid on a bullet wound. You're not facing the problem, that the problem is us, that the problem is our mindset. The problem is that we, like maybe knowing or not knowing, we tend to create the same things that favor the same people, unless we have the incorporation of other perspectives. And this is not blame anybody. It's nobody's fault. Everybody's trying to do their best. Everybody's in the same race. But until we understand that there are different perspectives and that there's no right or wrong, and the tools can be used for wherever you want to use it, and what is going to define this is actually what you want. This is for me, a much more sane and much more like fruitful discussion than if the AI is going to solve the world. We are outskirting ourselves of the solution and giving the responsibility to a tool. No, it's us. We are the guys. We are the solution. It's necessary. I think any new technology is necessary as long as you want to use it in a way. Things are not okay. AI is not the solution. Oh, AI is the solution. No. How can we actually incorporate AIs to be a friend, not a substitute? I don't want the AI to read in the book or paint a painting. I want it actually to help me continue having my culture. I don't want it to destroy my culture. I want actually to strengthen the people of Amazon. We are people for extractivists. We've been actually leading with it. And I see since data is the fuel of AI, I see in AI and in data an escape or a way of getting the Amazon people as contributing to the world without losing their culture. Just without mumbling a lot, the thing that is just a tool. We are the ones. We are the solution. How we use it, that depends on us. And we have to broaden our perspective on what they uses and what are the perspectives of the users. Not only ours. I'm living in the city, but the hotspots are not there, the biodiversity hotspots and the other things that are needed is for local communities. And they are not, almost never listen or adapted the technology for them. We're always trying to create new rockets instead of adapting new technology that already exists to the use of the common folk.
I just have one very short response as well to include in this, is that I just like to really emphasize this point about the principle of proportionality, and that we should use AI when it adds value and not as a replacement. And this consideration should be taken into account when we're considering when we should use AI. Is the harm disproportionate to the value that we're going to get from it?
That was passionate and also incredibly succinct. Ending on that note, Ellie, that is great. I keep your questions coming because we're gonna. I'm looking at your questions, and we're gonna go and try and take some of them in as much as time allows. So we have a question on LinkedIn asking, if AI is impacting the environment negatively, what individual efforts can we employ to neutralize the issue? Because every solution starts with individual effort. And I'd open that question up to both of you. But I would also kind of question, how do you two feel about emphasizing individual effort in this case? And what if we look at it, take a step back and look at it from the global context, how much of an importance is the individual effort? And what are those individual efforts that we can make? Are there also other systemic efforts to consider? And if so, what are your perspectives on it?
I'm happy to come in with this. Kind of on the individual effort question, I mean, something that I personally consider is kind of like the impact of doing a ChatGPT search is, I think it's like 500 milliliters of water is used per few searches. So just individually, I often think, do I need to be doing this? Is there an alternative route that I could take? Can I talk to people? Is it something that has to be done? So I think, thinking on an individual level, individual basis in that respect, I think's helpful. I think they go hand in hand, kind of the individual action, but also, as I've kind of emphasized throughout my contributions today, the national policies have to be alongside that. And I think a really important aspect of that policy making is really building awareness of the impact of AI, so that you can kind of inform onward conversation and discussions, and you can really empower communities with that knowledge, to again be making those kind of decisions for themselves about this proportionality question of whether it's an enhancer or kind of a disproportionate harm. So it's a bit of I'm straddling between the two here, but I think they really go hand in hand, in that the national policy is essential, but it's also to empower individuals.
I agree 100% with Ellie. I think they go hand in hand, of course. And I was always really biased, always incorporating the part, the conception of the Amazon perspective here, is that I agree 100% that they go hand in hand. For us, it's really difficult to understand things that are scalable again. So we don't think too much as a systemic situation. I don't mean me. I'm saying that the communities don't think much about the system, because the situations in Amazon, they're too peculiar. Problems or the uses of the AI, they are gonna vary a lot among them. So, and I'm quite ignorant on the use and the costs of energy of AI. I've been recently being educated on this, so to see how it takes a lot of energy and that. But we normally think as in systemic. Systemic is a community. We don't think systemic as global. So even the terms for us, systemic is working with the community, and then everybody has the same ideal. But to systemic as global, we normally don't have access to this, as this actually way of thinking still. Because all the things are created locally and treat locally things. And one of our great bottlenecks is exactly how can we actually evidence the things that we are doing locally, so we can evidence that they're contributing to global. It's really hard. How can we do this? I'm actually asking if people can put in the comments, because it is something really individual what we do in the communities as individual communities, but it cannot be actually retried in another one. It changes the whole system. The AI for me is made to be tailor-made. And the concept, at least, of scalability of our like contributing global goals, is not actually tangible for us right now, because what represents what is global is not including us. What is representing us being important? Okay, this global is not. So the thing that I agree that it's both hand in hand, but from the perspective of the Amazon, we don't have this global perspective, because we are trying to figure out our things here, the problems that are happening here, that it seems to be forgotten, not only here, but in Africa, in Southeast Asia, just getting the bias on our side. First, for us to become and act as a systemic thing, we have to understand that it first has to be local. For then we connect the local to the global. Thank you. And sorry for rambling again on the rest.
That's great. Thank you. We have a little bit more time for questions, so please keep dropping them in. I see some questions on how to get in touch with the panelists. And I'm wondering if someone on the team can help add in the details of the panelists and how they can get in touch with the panelist team for the questions or collaborations, perhaps in the chat. And we'll try and take a few more quick questions, if we can be really quick about it. We have a question from Kali B saying, I'm all for open data, but it takes a lot of time, money, and human labor to build, maintain, store, host open source data sets. How do we balance the value of open source with the resources or funding required for it? I'm guessing, Ellie, you would want to take a crack at this first. So I'm gonna direct this at you.
I can. I think that's a really challenging fundamental question. I guess my approach to it would be kind of, I think this is kind of a national policy area, and kind of exercises such as the RAM can help create this balance of where to invest funding into areas, because obviously the RAM kind of covers these 5 dimensions of economic, regulatory, culture. And I think in doing that exercise and taking stock, it's really important, first of all, to be aware of what data is already available, and then be able to kind of do those exercises of how much investment back you'll get from having the open data source. And within that as well, I think a really critical area is capacity building, which is, again, kind of considering what money you'll get back from investing into training individuals in the country to be able to host those data sets. So I'm sorry, that's not quite a complete answer to your question. I think it's a really challenging one, which will be on a case by case basis, but actually doing this exercise to have the fundamental understanding of the data available, and what that might look like to host the open data sources is kind of a really important first step.
There's no simple solution in the AI world, and a lot of them, it really depends is the answer, right? I see a lot of questions, particularly on how our conversation pertains to Africa, and ensuring decision making and the cultural realities of Africa are reflected and honored. So I'm gonna choose to take one, and we have to be really quick here. So how do we ensure that AI systems used for environmental and economic decision-making in Africa reflect local realities rather than being trained on Western-centric data? Who amongst you wants to take this?
Me,
Yeah,
let's see.
Ellie.
Finger pointed at me. Again, I'd say just it's really, really important to do kind of this RAM taking stock exercise, and to really know what the local context is, what's the reality on the ground. And so I'd really just promote this kind of taking stock exercise to be able to have, it's really about having the demand, and also having the fundamental what am I searching for? The fundamental reasoning for why you will go on to create a policy. And I think doing this taking stock exercise to have the data available to then be able to inform, creating a comprehensive data strategy grounded in the local context is really useful.
So feel free to drop in more questions, but we're probably at this time where we would love to again reflect on the session and get inputs from all of you. And before we do that, let's give our speakers a chance to just quickly, like if you had to give us 30 to 45-second takeaway, the one big takeaway that you want everybody here listening to our conversation to remember from our discussion today, what would you want it to be?
So I have 3, but they're very quick. The first is that I'd say that I think our conversation today has shown that a lot more work needs to be done to centre considerations of the impact of AI on the environment through the creation of national policies, but also on the ground work with local communities. I also wanted to emphasise that I think COP30 is going to provide a really good opportunity to reaffirm commitment and also energy into existing initiatives, and really make sure that they're working and that we can get the best out of all of the work that's been done for all this time beforehand. And then the final one is to really emphasize this principle of proportionality, and that it's so important to use as a guide for future developments of AI.
Thanks, Ellie. Gabrielle, what's your one big takeaway, or a few big takeaways?
Just one. Thanks, Sally, for this. My one big takeaway is that we've been always doing things that actually got right, but now it's time for a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is everything that has to happen in, at least in biodiversity, on the biodiversity hotspot, has to be led by the community. Has to be community-led, not community as a partner, as somebody collecting data. The technology has to be able to solve the problems of local communities that always been outskirts, because they've been doing the work of restoration, of protection, and conservation for thousands of years and never been paid and never been anything. So for any part in the endeavor of AI, at least related to ecosystem, biodiversity, I cannot claim for help or legal rights, but in this, we always have to start from bottom. Now being as top bottom in an inflicting methodology, but it's always trying to understand what is the problem in the community. After the problem in the community is solved, you can't. It's easy because then the community works, but you can only start by looking from the bottom, from as being solution-driven AIs for local communities. This is what we're never doing. They're actually always inflicting what is our goals, our ideals on everyone. And basically, this is my only takeaway. It has always to start from the bottom. Is that how we started life? Is that's crawling? It's always from the bottom.
Amazing. Thanks, Gabriel. So start from the bottom, be forward thinking, and utilize the knowledge that we already have. So with that, we're gonna, just to wrap this session up, take a quick poll with all of you. You've been with us through 2 sessions, but especially after this discussion, do you still see AI as a game changer for climate action? And I don't know how the poll works, but hopefully it should be on your screen and you should have 3 options. Yes, it has potential, but it needs careful governance. Or no, AI is just another tool, not a silver bullet. Or mixed. It has promise, but the risks are a bit concerning. So hopefully you should have the poll on your screens, and we look forward to all of your inputs. And if you're saying one or the other, feel free to also, if you want to drop in the chat why you think yes or no, or you have mixed feelings or whatever that is, and any other final reflections you have. Okay, amazing. And while you drop your final reflections, it's Gabrielle, Ellie, thank you so much for the really diverse and rich discussion. At least I learned a lot, and I also see so many questions from all the participants where really a lot of answers are, it depends. AI, we've seen again and again, and very passionately, emphasizing that AI needs to be built bottom up. Local communities need to be taken into account. And what we have right now, we're not ready enough. And all the tools, including UNESCO's Ethics for AI framework, that is available and where we can engage more. And we don't want AI to be a band-aid on a bullet wound. And we need to keep proportionality in context as we think about decisions on where AI is appropriate or where it's not. So in other words, it depends. And that's been an interesting discussion, and we hope to continue the conversation. I'm gonna, with that, return the control back to Andrea to wrap up the session.
Thank you so much, Ravati. Thank you so much, Ellie Copeland of UNESCO's AI unit, and Gabriel Nunes from Gainforest, science lead at Gainforest. That was such an insightful discussion and such a great way to wrap up this digital forum, AI for the Earth. Thank you so much, of course, to the audience. You've been so active with your questions, with participating in the polls, asking for more information on how to get involved. So that's really encouraging for us. We hope that you can stay in touch, subscribe to our newsletter, and make sure to tune in to our upcoming event, GLF Forests, so you don't miss any of the insightful conversations that we have in store for you. Once again, on behalf of the Global Landscapes Forum, I'm thrilled to wrap up this digital forum, AI for the Earth, and thanking all of the speakers who have joined us today to share their insights on data ownerships, highlighting that communities should be able to co-decide on what's being done with the data, as Camille Rivera from Oceanus Conservation shared during session 1, complementing it with the fact that communities need to be the direct beneficiaries of the results of the AI tools that are being developed, as Gabriel Fonladosa said from his experience in Côte d'Ivoire. Moving on to Ellie Copeland's insightful comment on the fact that we should use AI where it adds value. And of course, we cannot oversee Gabriel Nunes' intervention. AI is not a silver bullet. We are the solution. So with that, I'd like to thank you all once again and see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of the evening and the day.